everybody. Now listening to live spirit and coffee. Got my coffee here. Salud. Cheers to you. So yum. Okay, let's get started. So um, I was, as I have told you before, I'm a spiritual alchemist. And some people are like, well, what does that mean? What is Um, it just means that you follow natural law. You understand that life is a process. It's not just a one thing, right? People want to put it into one thing. And it just means that we look at everything. Good morning. I don't know who just got on here. If I don't say good morning, please say good morning so that I know you're here. I love to say good morning to people. Um, Okay, so let's take a look here. So I wanted to read a couple things. I wanted to talk about how do we use good morning, Jose, and sort of shift gears a little bit from away from I mean, I'm sure it's going to be interwoven into the conversation dialogue, but something that takes us a little bit away from all of the crazy that's going on into understanding now another practice or other tools we can use in order to help us through the crazy, the chaos, and to bring ourselves back again to love. As a spiritual alchemist, good morning, Suze. As a spiritual alchemist, that's what we do. We take everything, we don't deny anything, even the most uncomfortable things, and we utilize them to figure out how to come back to unity, to harmony, to peace. And the way to do that, there's different tools, right? There's different practices. People do things differently. I do things differently, right, than you would. So it all there everybody does it. Good morning, Sandra, from different practices. So how do we utilize what we call natural law or the elements to bring us back to our sanctuary, back to our peace, back to our harmony? Um, and that's really what, again, Spirit and Coffee is about, right? Always bringing us back to love and using different tools and practices to get us there. Now, sometimes the tools that we have used in the past don't necessarily work for us anymore. We're trying to figure out what are the new practices. How do we engage in life in a different way to bring us back to that place or that peace of mind or that space of sanctuary where we can actually take a breath, a full breath, right? And not feel like we're overwhelmed or we're cornered or whatever it is. So, if you understand nature, you know that there are some basic elements, and it's been talked about in movies. There's been movies about it. There's if you look at the Native American culture, it's all wrapped around it, and various other cultures as well. In fact, most cultures, all cultures will talk about it, and it's the basic elements of earth, water, air, and fire. And you've heard this. And so it's like, okay, great. We know we have earth, water, air, fire. We understand that these are elements that are we see in the natural world, but how do we apply those particular elements into our life, or how do we utilize them and understand how we can participate and utilize that particular information to support us in bringing us back into oneness, wholeness, love again. So there's a couple of things. So, and I've done these before, and I've talked about like the earth, water, air, fire. Now, there is also the spiritual realm where that's more like the internal process. But how do we take that what is internal and create into the external, manifest it into the external world? Good morning, Scott. Here's the deal. I have in my life created so much. I've done so much. I'm beyond blessed for the life that I have. And I just want people to be able to have the same blessings and gifts, right, that I've received. I want them to understand that they have the ability to have the same blessings, that there's nothing special about me. There's nothing, you know, I'm just another human being, but my experiences are vastly different than a lot of people. And I ask myself, why? why this, why that, is why do I feel like I feel like there's this privilege, and I'm like, well, what is it? How do I share that with people so that they're able to experience it? And really what it is the way that I engage life. And that's the spiritual piece of it, right? How do I engage life? So I engage it from a place of mostly optimism. Okay. So I rarely am I a negative person, right? Or I don't want to say negative, I don't think that's the right word. Pessimistic. I'm usually optimistic and bouncy and lively and dancing around and singing, and that's by nature, that's me. But there are times, of course, that are hard. So in those harder times, how do I pull myself back into that space of optimism or opportunism or whatever, so that I'm able to see that there's opportunity available? And that's the thing, is that so much of what we're seeing in front of us becomes chaos, that we can't even figure out where the opportunity is. And so we may miss out on some of the greatest opportunities to enjoy life, to engage life from a place of fun and excitement and joy. And we miss out on those opportunities because we're so ingrained in could have, would have, should have, past stories or whatever. And that's the spiritual realm. So, and then we're talking about or the macrocosm, I should say, rather than spiritual. It's the macrocosm, it's the bigger picture. So how do we take the tools at hand, like earth, water, air, fire? How do we use those tools to bring us back to sort of sort out the spiritual world, so that when we're experiencing and engaging life, we're seeing things from a brighter perspective than we would have before? Okay. And we're going to start with, we'll start with fire. We'll just go as the book goes, right? Because I think that that's the best way to do it. And we're trying it's called the minor arcanas. Basically, it is the elemental things, right? It's not the bigger picture, but it's the small tools that we use to get to the bigger picture, to understand the bigger picture, to um, perceive the bigger picture from a different experience. Because I say that a lot. How do you see the experience? Can you see it from a different perspective? But how do you do that if you're just stuck in the same way of approaching life and a situation? Okay. So we have the major arcana or minor arcana. So we want to talk about fire, right? And we call it wands, and it shows us powerful energy of fire in many forms. It can be as playful as a star fire, as comforting as a campfire, or as consuming as a forest fire. A simple candle flame can represent magical potential. Our passions take many forms and affect the world in so many different ways. We're not always aware of our own power or consequences as we wield our inner fire. Okay. So it helps us to understand our inner fire. Okay. The inner fire that we have within. Now, another thing about the fire energy is that it holds divine will. Okay. So divine will is in there, but it also holds the ego. And typically it's represented by the fire signs. And we have this sign. So this goes into all different astrology. It goes into the Kabbalah. It goes into the everything that you could possibly think of, how fire energy works. We know that death and rebirth is in fire as well. We know that fire allows us to put to rest things. Good morning, Janice. Put to rest the things that may not serve us. And out of that, good morning, Antonio, arises new things, right? It's new birth. It's kind of like these forest fires. They'll do controlled fires, they'll burn all of the old, and out of the old comes this new birth and this rising new plant. So for you, how do you utilize that? How do you find the willpower within? How do you find your fire flame within? Okay, and how do you use that to engage life? This is one of your tools. It's understanding that there is no duality within the fire energy. Good morning, Suzanne. And that the two are part of the same continuum. Divine will, okay, divine will and the ego are part of the same coin. It's almost like there's two faces of the coin, and we have both, and we can use both. Now, neither right, wrong, good, or bad, and this is saying that everything is from a neutral space. How are you using the fire energy is what's important. Have you even considered it or thought about it? Some people have never thought about it. They haven't even, they're like, what does that even mean? Okay, so divine will is the ability to have inspiration and to have that flame ignited, right? That flame that gets ignited, right? And so we know that we need what? Air. We need air to ignite flames, right? We need some air, some oxygen, or it gets suffocated, right? So we know that the two kind of work together, and we'll get into the air and what that means, right? But we know that divine will is critical. It is the lower chakra, it is the flame, it's at the root, it is sort of the inferno that helps us to move forward. It is the drive, it is the focus. And so when we think of it, we think of, and if you thought of it from like, even if we looked at astrology, or if we looked at the signs, right, we would say like Leos, right, are fire, Aries is fire. And we look at the different horoscopes, we can say, okay, well, what does that mean for me? Because so you say, oh, well, you're a Leo, you're this or that. You hear people all the time, right? They're always talking about people's signs and stuff. We have that in us as well, whether that's our sign or not our sign. Everybody has that willpower, that strength of a lion that represents the fire within us. And then if you looked at the Aries is the warrior, right? But Aries seems to want to fight, right? And so using that as a warrior, sometimes it can go out of control where the war on somebody is not necessarily the war that you want to rage. So there's a fine line between utilizing the divine will and your war on somebody else. There's that tiny line, but it's part of the same coin and how you engage it. So if you looked, and so something you could do if you wanted to kind of look at your fire energy, right, and see where you're at with it, and see if you're utilizing it the way you want to, is sort of put two columns, and in one column just put divine will, another one put ego, and that's it. And then every time that you engage a situation that's uncomfortable, every time that you engage a situation that you're not certain where it's coming from, ask yourself, what would the ego do and what would the divine will do? If it was coming from strength and willpower to drive something, or if it was coming from, wanting to rage war. Now, again, sometimes we need both. Sometimes we have to stand up as warriors. The ego isn't a bad thing as long as you know how to tame it. We all have one. So how do you tame the ego, right? How do you pet it and say, not today? Because you're just going to stay there. I'm trying to think of what are the other fire signs. We have, let's see, Leo, Aries. Help me out if you guys know. I'm trying to think of all the different signs. The first two that come to mind. I don't know why. I don't think, maybe Sagittarius. I don't know what Sagittarius is. Maybe. Anywho, if you guys know, let me know. And it's perhaps something I should look into is what are the fire signs and how we use those elemental forces, um, archetypes to support us in moving forward. Okay. So we have the fire. So beyond the fire, right, we have earth, water, air, fire. So now let's go to the next one. And in each one of them, you're going to find that there's this sort of maybe what seems like a duality in the two. And it's just an opportunity for us to engage them from whatever way we want to engage. Good morning, Betty. Okay. Good morning. Is it DC United? Oh yeah, DC United, 1971. Um, all right. Good morning, Vinny. Vinny. Let's talk about cups or water, the element of water. Water is in all carnations. It represents emotions and relationships in all their forms, including icy coldness, a rushing force that threatens to overtake you, a refreshing pond that eases your body, heart, and mind, a still pool that encourages reflection. It is feelings, okay? It is the feelings that we have, emotion, tears that we cry. Water can be fluid and moving. It's also creative. Okay, it's the space of creativity, but it also can be ice cold, right? And shun you off. Can also wipe away things. It also, instead of like, we think about water, instead of it penetrating or going through something, it goes around it, right? There's no force sometimes, but it's powerful enough, right, to corrode and to diminish and to break, depending on, how how fast the water's going or moving. So water is our emotion, and asking yourself. So we've gotten sort of like, well, what is the fire within us? The fire tells us, like, are we using will or ego? The emotions tell us, are we handling our emotions? Where are our emotions? How are we feeling about a situation? Are we allowing ourselves to actually let out that energy, the tears? Or are we being dramatic? That's another thing too. Are we over dramatizing a situation? Okay, there could be a little bit of drama in the emotional stuff, right? Like the drama queen, right? And so, sometimes we play out these dramas, and is that wrong? No. I've been dramatic, of course. I'm human. I've been dramatic. I've all over the place. But to bring your emotions back to center is to ask yourself if you're allowing yourself to release the emotion, to be fluid within the emotion. Are you blocking the emotion? Are you allowing it to flow? Water wants to flow. If water stays still, it becomes murky. Now, new growth will happen within that water, but sometimes the water can get toxic if it doesn't move. So it's about movement flow. It's also about reflection. And if you notice that if you go into a place where the water's clear and you look into the water, you see your reflection. You see this, the use of this information being used in movies. You see it being used in writings, in everything. This information is used everywhere. This is natural law, because we know that we just watch water, watch what it does. It's creative, but when you contain it, it could become toxic. It wants to flow and move. It's a very feminine quality, right? It's very open and moving and receiving, and it gives life, right? So now we know sort of how do we use our emotion, right? This is another tool. Again, you can use your columns. Am I being fluid or am I not being? Am I being ice cold? Am I a rock, a solid? Am I an ice cube, or am I water, a river? Or am I just a pond staying still, stagnant, not moving? You could look at your pond. You can even do an exercise where you sort of ask yourself, this is my pond. This is me. I haven't moved. What toxic things are growing out of here? What things that are growing in here that are serving me? Are the things that are growing in here taking out the things, are eating away at the things that are toxic for me? Have I inserted something into this pond that's going to help me to grow beautiful, whatever it is, right? So the water again, okay? And then we have the next element, which I think is the hardest, probably one. And I say it's the hardest because it becomes our throat chakra. Um, it is the air, okay? Air itself, hard to for us to get to a point where we're able to communicate what is coming up for us out of fear, out of whatever. If all these other things, our chakra systems are not aligned, and there's not a foundation built within these different parts of yourself, it is very hard to communicate what you have to say, and then also to allow your mental space to be okay with whatever feedback is received from that communication. So that is what we call it the swords, but it's our thoughts, our communication, ideas about the truth. This is a complicated energy. It could be dangerous, whether whipped up into a frenzy or still emotionless. It is both clouds and it clears the mind. It can build bridges, bring comfort, or sever lives. And here's the deal: the good representation of this particular element is the Queen of Swords. Um, and I talk about the Queen of Swords because she says, off with her head, right? Literally, we have the ability to be, they say that the sword of the mouth, right? The mouth is the sword, and that we can cut people off, and that we can pierce through people's hearts by our words. So, understanding where you are mentally before you actually spew out into the world what you want to say. Again, we're using all these are all the tools that are sort of in our bag now, right? We have these tools that we can engage life from. And the swords or the wind or the air element is super hard. It's very flighty, but it's also very, it's hard because it deals with the mental, it deals with our speech and communication. To master this is one of the hardest things to master. It's hard to master again because when you're speaking out into the world, you can be piercing like an arrow, right? Like you can be like a knife. You can just be like stab somebody right in the heart with your words. But it's also a space of negotiation. We use this in particular, like with lawyers, right? When we think about lawyers, or we think about a justice system where there's has to be this communication and this understanding of how do we use both sides, la la la, and how do we articulate. It's like a politician, right? They've become pretty skilled. They've been skilled at communicating from diplomacy. So our words, the mental space and all that, hard one to get through, probably the most complicated, probably the hardest one. But it is where the magic happens. It is where we start to materialize into the physical world the very things that we are communicating into existence. So you can ask yourself questions about this particular thing. What am I willing to negotiate and not negotiating? What am I negotiating? What am I not negotiating? What do I need to be right about? Because if you put it in one, so you did two columns and you looked at the things that you're not negotiating, things that you're being piercing to the tongue, right? They call it piercing. Piercing, why? Because it's a sword, like a dagger in the heart. This is where people talk mitote about each other, talk behind people's backs, where they don't go to the source and be able to communicate directly to the person they have an issue with. This is that point where people sort of start to convolute the way things might be rather than going to the source and having that authentic approach of communication. Not easy, right? I think people have told me, I appreciate you for your authenticity, for your vulnerability to be out there to communicate. It may not come out pretty. It may not be the perfect way to say it, but I'm not going to not say something because I understand what it means if I don't. I understand these things. I utilize these tools in order so that I can move forward in my divine birthright, so that I can communicate and articulate my experience clearly. My experience is not for you guys, it's for me, just like your experience is for you, not for me. And your experience is very real to you. But how do you communicate that to an individual? Or how do you allow them to understand where you're coming from? This becomes very, very, very important. Hardest one to get through. We could probably spend a lifetime, in which I have a lifetime to figure this one out. And I will forever spend my life being able to express or articulate the experience in the what I see in Maya, how I want to create, and how do I want to mold what I see in front of me into something magnificent. How do I do that? How do you do that? How do you take the very fabric of what we see and make something meaningful for our lives, a legacy? How do you do that? Well, you know you have your divine will and you know you have your emotional. Now you just got to put it together in the communication and the mental space that's going to support it. But this isn't an easy one. Most people get stuck on their throat chakra. A lot of people get stuck on the throat chakra. They don't get past their throat chakra. They don't communicate what they want. Because they have all of these emotional things that they're holding on to, right? Or they don't feel safe and secure, or they don't have the will power, or the ego is taking control. So again, it's almost like a buildup, right? Okay, so hardest one to get through, and we can talk more about these different elements as we move forward, because I think it would be super helpful to understand how to use the tools of alchemy. And this is just one very small part of the tools that we use in order to manifest, and in order to create divine will. Okay, and the last one that we have on here is what we call Earth. Okay, and this is the physical world. This is the abundance. This is the lack. This is the rich, grounded energy. Um, and it could be infinitely fulfilling, provides stability, security. If left unintended or worked with unhealthy intentions, it can become stagnant or suffocating. So again, you see the duality in this piece. We just basically, when we get stuck somewhere, we have the opportunity to move out of it. So we know, as spiritual alchemists, we know that it's not, this too shall pass. We get that. And when people understand that the storm or the tower or the crazy or the chaos will subside eventually, that it doesn't last forever, because we know that there's this ebb and flow, right? There's this natural rhythm of the world and the earth, where it's like chaos, calm, chaos, calm, chaos, calm. So getting through the chaos is the really hard part. Okay. But when we get through the communication, we're able to experience the abundance. But it could be lack too that we experience. And we've got to go back to our tools, right? Where am I feeling lack? Why am I feeling lack? Am I stagnant? Am I not moving? Am I not working? Am I not focused on a goal? What goals am I focused on? Are those goals actually supporting what I want to create in life? There's all these questions that you get to ask yourself, readjust, and then you start to create the world that you want to see. So these are the tools so that you can create your world, your universe, what you want to see, the beauty you want to see in your life. That doesn't mean that there's going to be times that are all beautiful, that there's not going to be times of heartache and hurt. Of course there are, because those are lessons to learn, to bring you to a point where when you do create what you are out to create, it becomes this beautiful, like, I don't know, what do we want to call it, this orb of sunshine. But again, it takes practice on all of the elements, not just one. And we're constantly reshaping, remolding. I have created a beautiful, amazing life like this. using these tools. Not necessarily tools. I've never really talked about them on Spirit and Coffee, but there you go. Salud. And I think it's time to start teaching about those tools. Why? Of course, Suze, because this is information that is not going to be taught to you at a school. They don't teach, I mean, they kind of teach kids this. They sort of put it out there, but they don't really tell you. This is not sometimes you don't learn it at home because if their parents didn't learn, how would they know? They don't know. This is something that you seek, right? It's if you're a seeker and you want to understand and you want to know how to create a life of um from God's will, when you're like I have this love in my heart and I want to create under divine will. I want to extend myself in God's love. How do I make that look in the physical world? How is it expressed? How do I experience the beauty and the through all of this chaos and hurt and suffering, but how do I experience the beauty of life? How do I bring myself to the beauty back to the beauty of life and remember it? How? Well, here's some tools that can support you with that. It's not everything an alchemist has, but it's a very, very, very small toolbox. This small toolbox is can create big results in your life if you utilize it. And it takes self-investment, right? Because this is not about investing in something else. This is about investing in you. Most people will not invest in themselves. They will invest in, I don't know, buying a car, they'll invest in buying a house, but they won't invest in themselves. I do the opposite. I invest in myself first because this meat suit that I have is really the only thing I own. And it was a gift from something more powerful than I could ever. I didn't make myself. I say that all the time. I didn't make me. So whatever was responsible for all of this, I honor it by saying, now what do I do with it? Why was I given this body? Why was I given this mind? Why was I given this mouth, these eyes, these ears? For what? What was the purpose? Was it just to just sit here and not do anything? No, it was to create. It was to participate in this big, beautiful world. How do I participate? What does that look like for me? These are bigger questions that I think most people don't get to sometimes because they think that they're programmed at least to think that they have to work 9 to 5. And I think people are shifting now that we've been put in quarantine to rethink how we live our life, rethink what's important, what really matters. How do I want to experience life? I wanted to travel, so guess what? I traveled. I've traveled all over the place and I continue to travel and I'm never going to stop traveling because I love doing that. But I came here to experience things. I didn't come here to just sit around and not experience. So you get to ask yourself those questions. Get to those deeper, deeper questions for yourself. Or don't. It's totally up to you. Again, choices, right? It's your choice. You can write those things down. What are you afraid of? Get past the fear that comes from whatever it is that's holding you back. And another question you ask yourself, where's the energy being held? Is it in my fire? Is it in my water? Is it in my air? Is it in the material world where I think there's too much lack and limitation? Where I don't think I'm worthy enough of these gifts, where I don't identify myself as enough? Or is it in the willpower or the fear? Because maybe what? Usually it comes down to a worthiness conversation. I mean, ask yourself that question, am I worthy? I believe you're worthy. I know you're worthy. But do you believe you're worthy? Doesn't matter what I think. Who cares? If you don't think it doesn't matter. Okay. So I think I'm gonna continue on this particular, I know I keep shifting gears, but it's because I want to make sure that whatever I'm providing is actually gonna support you guys. And I feel like right now we're at at a great point in time where people um may be searching for tools to help them at least continue on their journey to build their legacy, right? And my legacy is to leave a legacy of wisdom, whatever that looks like. Now, wisdom is just our experience, really. It's applied knowledge to experience and saying, does this work or not work? And then there's many shifts in that, right? But to share the wisdom of what comes from me, that's my legacy, and I'm going to continue to do it. So find your legacy. What is that? And how do you continue to grow that even in a time of chaos or a time of uncertainty or a time of unity, because now we're seeing unity everywhere as well, or at a time of overwhelm? And how do we continue on our road? So there are tools, okay? And this is how we use the tools. Perhaps we'll go through each individual element, talk about how it looks from different scenarios. If you guys have a scenario you want to go through, when you're on here and we're live, you guys are more than welcome to bring your stories. We can walk through it, we could go through it, and we can understand how those different elements can play out in your life. Biggest thing, ask yourself questions, powerful questions. Write down questions for yourself and be in those questions, right? So that you're on a quest. You're always on a quest. Okay. All right. So I love you guys. Have a great day. And I believe we're going to continue down this road. I think this is the right way to take Spirit and Coffee right now. I'm just trying to figure out what is the best direction. And I believe that this is the best direction for right now. Will it shift? Yes, it could. Remember, fluid, open, flexible. And then when I feel like it's supporting everybody, then I'll be like, okay, or at least the people that are showing up, if it's supporting them, I'll be like, okay, we can focus on this so that it supports you guys. Okay. Alrighty. So I love you guys. Have a really awesome, what is it, Taco Tuesday? I don't really eat tacos, but you certainly can. Taco Tuesday. And I will be seeing you guys tomorrow. Okay. Love you guys. Bye.